Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, considering pros and cons of an expanded NCAA basketball tournament, including its impact on the Big 12 conference, and also a cold glass of water to sober up your Monday. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs is helping you find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you as always, and we got a couple of things to touch on today's episode to kick off a new week. We will wrap it up with a football conversation that will be sort of a callback to a conversation we had last week regarding Red Raider preseason expectations, both in the Big 12 Conference and beyond as we get ready for 2024. But wanted to start today on a round ball front, as we saw reporting last week that I suppose was not unexpected. Some may have been holding out hope that this would not be the case, but reporting indicates it is coming down the pipe and kind of seemed like, I don't know if I want to say a formality or what exactly, but an expanded NCAA basketball tournament seems to be coming our way very, very soon. I don't know where it'll wind up, but saw reporting indicating an expansion by way of maybe 6 to 8 teams, winding up like, I guess, in a 72-team-ish kind of field. And I may be tripping up on some numbers there because I don't even remember if I'm considering the play-in teams in that number anymore or not. But either way, it is set to be expanded, not officially, but again, reporting that the indications are it will be going that way. Want to get into some of how that affects us locally, both at Texas Tech and within the Big 12 Conference, sort of maybe what profile of program it helps or maybe what profile it hurts, both from a program or league perspective. And want to talk some about what Brett Yormark has said before about what he wanted and sort of by proxy what his conference wanted. But what do you make in general about seeing some indications that this is right around the corner, Chris?
Yeah, there's a lot of people against this. I think a lot of people that cover the sport are for the most part against it. Don't mess with this. It's not broken. What are we doing? And then when you start to read that, there may not necessarily be any additional money coming in immediately. Like, what? Okay, now I really have questions. There's some, I think more money for leagues and things to be had based on what they're talking about doing. And we can get into that. But essentially, yeah, it's being talked about enough to where I think it's called bracket creep. Everything expands. I mean, they expanded the MLB playoffs. I mean, 60-something% of the NBA teams make the playoffs now when you have the play-in games to even just to get into the playoffs, but it's still the postseason and all those things. They've added wild cards to the NFL. You've expanded the college football playoff. This is next. This will be minor in scope, and I think could it affect or benefit the Big 12? Possibly, probably, not necessarily. So the two proposals. So what happens is every summer the conference commissioners all get together with the NCAA, and I think that they get into, I think that this probably meeting dealt with the House case and revenue sharing and all that. But I think that these were some things that were presented to all parties in this. And I think it was two different proposals. One is basically just adding 4 teams. The other was adding 8. So I don't think there's much discussion anymore about moving this thing into an 80 or 96 or really, really bloating it. And there's some reasons why for that. I think at this point they are kind of limited on what they can do to expand. But I do think that they are talking about adding one of these two proposals. I'd be shocked if they don't pass. And I think that This next year, it would stay the same. However, I do think something would very likely happen the following year. I bet you hear about that in the next, 3 to 9 months that they've gone ahead and approved one of these two proposals. And so essentially what they're saying is they would basically be saying we're going to add 4 or 8 more teams to the play-in situation, which happens on those Tuesday and Wednesday of before the tournament starts in Dayton. And they've talked about adding a separate West Coast or Western location where they would kind of be able to be a little bit more geographically, located to help out some teams that once they moved on from these play-in games that we would already have them in the, closer to where they are. Because I don't think people realize, like when we were back in, I want to say 2000, I guess that would have been the Final Four year, 2019, when the Red Raiders opened up in Tulsa, there was a team that rolled in there that was a first winner or however we're phrasing those games. And they rolled in at like 5 a.m, had to try to do all the media stuff and then play a game the following day where you're just way out of your routine. And I can't remember who that was. I'd have to go back and look, but it's crazy travel. But that's essentially what you're looking to add here. It won't be any drastic way that the fans view this tournament. It would still essentially be a 64-team tournament once Thursday morning started, like it's always been. But would it mean more spaces for the Power Four leagues to maybe squeeze in there a bit? Yeah, I do think so.
Doesn't it have to be from that pond? I really don't know where else they would come from to find these deserving programs other than the gooey middle of some of those types of leagues.
Yeah, there's I think if you added 4 or 8, I would guess that 80% of those bids, whether it be 3 of 4 or 6 of 8, would largely come from the Power 4 leagues. Whereas you're going to get an Indiana State, which got left out last year. You're going to get some other team that with a really good record that just didn't play anybody in the non-conference that they're going to find a spot for. And the argument is always, well, you don't play anybody. And then Indiana State's going, it's because nobody will play us. We've tried to play anybody that would want to. We'll travel wherever and nobody wants, so there's that deal. But I think that the folks that are against this argue that, hey, there used to be a Power 5 league that it no longer exists. You can go look at the Pac-12 over the last decade. They have gotten on average 4 to 5 at-large bids on average every year over the last decade. And they also get the automatic bid. Mm-hmm. So the Power 4 leagues that are wanting the more access, you're going to get those bids that the Pac-12 isn't using anymore. But the commissioners come back and say, well, folks, we've got an 18-team league, a 16-team league. Our leagues are much bigger than they used to be. So you're skewing the number. We need, heaven forbid you keep it's not fair if you keep you're about to start playing 20 conference games. What if you're sitting there at 8 and 12 in the Big 12 and all 12 losses are against bona fide top 25 teams? Like, that's not right. We deserve a spot. And so I think the NCAA is going, we didn't ask you to grow your leagues to 16 and 18 teams. You see what I mean? Everybody's just finger pointing and there's a math component, that there's all that. But I think the commissioners are ultimately going to win out. They're trying to find a happy medium here to where there is more access, but they don't. Because I'll tell you, the biggest problem they've got.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And summertime means baseball, burgers, and money in the bank when you get to picking winners with FanDuel. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $200 you can use to cool off and beat the heat with a refreshing parlay. an over-under play, or by getting the Moneyline Mojo going. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make a splash by adding a big win to your summer bucket list with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Because I'll tell you, the biggest problem they've got is the calendar. And here's why. You've basically set up your conference tournaments for years to come. The Masters is set for years to come, and you're going, this is the NCAA tournament conversation as it relates to the Big 12 and all that. What am I worried about the Masters for? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Turner is the folks that write this giant check, okay? They write this giant check that funds the NCAA based on this 3-week sporting event. And everybody's got all these TV contracts in place and dates booked in arenas and all that for all these conference tournaments that are in that first, second week in March, for years to come. The Masters is set. Well, who televises the Masters? Turner and CBS do. It does massive ratings as well. Massive. This tournament can't really expand past the 3-week time frame. So you really can't do much more than what you're basically talking about here and tweak it and add some more initial, but it is more access. So they're just trying to find where everybody can kind of semi-win this deal. I don't know if anybody's ready to say that you're going to make tons of money, but what the commissioners are saying is more of my teams in and advancement means more units for me. So the pie may not necessarily get bigger, but my league may have a chance to get more pieces of that pie, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it does make sense. I'm curious, going back to some of what, we heard from Brett Yormark over the last weeks and months, and eventually saying, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but eventually saying that his coaches in the Big 12 Conference supported the expansion of the tournament. So how does this reality, you think, kind of track with, I guess, the Yormark and/or Big 12 wish list that we know of?
Yeah, well, he would be getting what he's asked for, and he would say, I want more access. I feel like if you add 4 or 8 more spots into this tournament, more of my teams from this league, whether it be 1 or 2, maybe on average, would get a spot into this deal. And then it's up to the teams that are in the dance to generate that money. And he's betting on the fact that because every time in the NCAA tournament you advance the next, I guess every time you advance with a win or the next weekend or whatever it is, there's these units, and it's a formula, and it's based on like a 5 to 7 year time frame. So you're like, in other words, the Big 12 and Texas Tech is getting money from their 2019 Final Four run and has been getting it and is going to get it for the next 2. It's just this running formula that really never stops.
Yeah.
And so what he's saying is football, this side of it is, they're going to get, y'all made this formula based on all these SEC teams, and that's why they're getting more money. I want more access and I want more money for the league, and I want us to be able to say we should get more for basketball. Well, and so if your teams continue to do this and win like they have been, whether it be national championships or playing in title games like the Red Raiders did, then you would inherently benefit as a league and an institution based on that. And he feels like I want more opportunities to earn that money. Because, I mean, heck, man, you got a team like BYU last week. They signed the NBA coach from the Suns, for example. Last week they've gotten 2 5-star players, 2 5-stars. And this is a team that's not been included in these preseason top 25s. They lost their coach. They lost some of their roster. I'm just trying to paint the picture of they could be like ranked 30th and have some of the best players in the country that are lottery picks in a one and done situation. They're not even getting any ink on being a top 25 team. And so this is because right now on paper, the Big 12 is just scary. And I think that's what Brett Yormark is betting on, the fact that it's going to stay this way. People are going to continue to invest. That money that we had talked about over the weekend in that YouTube comment show that we did, we were talking about some of the monies. It's going to Kansas State just bought a power forward for $2 million. So there's serious resources and revenue being put into the sport of men's basketball as it relates to this league. And I think Brett Yormark is just saying, I'm willing to bet on that, and I'm going to bet on it that it will continue, and I'm going to bet that it's going to continue to be successful in March, and indirectly we will get more money as a league because of that. So he's pushing for this. He wants expansion. He'd probably push for 8 because he's going to say, okay, now we can get 2 to 3 of those spots. If there's 8 added to this deal.
I know that some of this added revenue or added money is a result. Monies, I should say monies, because when we talk a large amount of money, it becomes monies.
Yeah. I had to learn that term, monetize, monies, all that stuff. Yeah, it sounds silly, but
this is a result of, as it stands, this formula that you're describing. But Brett Yormark also describes situations using the college football playoffs logic as it relates to the SEC or the Big Ten. I should say that inversely, using the SEC and Big Ten's logic as it relates to the college football playoff to suggest that, well, we probably deserve, we being the Big 12 conference, a bigger portion or a bigger payout from this basketball tournament, since we're represented more often and to a greater degree. So I still wonder if maybe that's going to be at play sometime down the road when you're talking about maybe revamping a formula or the way that those things are paid out. But before we move on to football, I wanted to ask you, we know about whether it's the cash or whatever it might be, maybe more of something that we enjoy, that being the tournament in general. We can probably kind of imagine the good things about this or what we might like about this. Are there any unintended consequences or cons in general that are floating around in your head? Do we have to wait and kind of see maybe what those negatives are, or anything you're anticipating that you're like, this may not be the best impact, whether it has anything to do with the Big 12 or not, but just in general as a fan of college basketball, anything sticking out to you that you think you might already bank on as something that's not going to be an improvement?
It's got a participation trophy component to it. I think most people that operate in this space and cover it full time saying that you're just not leaving anybody out. You haven't been leaving anybody out of these tournaments that could have won it or that belonged in. I mean, that's the argument. And so it's not going to change the way people view it. I mean, I don't know what the ratings are for those Tuesday and Wednesday games in Dayton anyways. And maybe if you add a few more of the Power 5 and bigger name brands that just had average years or got hot late and eked their way in, maybe there would be a little more interest. I do think it may be one of the, not that this is a reason, but I mean, it does make the end of the regular season a bit spicier, I guess, because there's a few more teams that maybe have a chance, or you can't bury them and say, man, they're just out. They couldn't afford a loss in Kansas City in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, or whatever conference tournament you want to talk about. There's a few more teams that I would guess have a bit, a 10th life, to use the old 9 lives. Yeah. They got 9 lives, maybe they'd give them a 10th life, and there would be, maybe some interest. As far as the negative goes, you're just going to hear a lot of, you're watering it down. You're rewarding mediocrity. What are we doing? This is a money grab. And I don't even necessarily know that it is a money grab. I just think this is the NCAA listening to people like Brett Yormark with a bit of an axe to grind. Because see, here's the difference in the football part. The football part doesn't have to listen to the NCAA. They got to get together and create their own formula, and the CFP is in its own entity. The NCAA is in charge of this event. They run it, and so everything has to run through them. And so I think that, somebody like Brett Yormark or some of the commissioners could go, hey, expand it or we'll sue you. I don't know what their threat would be, but to get them to calm down or go, okay, we'll give you what you want. Because I think ultimately, here's the other thing to think about. Ultimately, the NCAA may lose money off of this proposition. And here's why. If you expand the men's, you're trying to tell me that they can't, in this day and age, expand the women's, and they will. And I think it just costs the NCAA a lot with the way that travel works and the arenas and all these things. I just think this would be a bit of a net loss overall, but I think it also appeases some of the important folks in the room and gets them to quiet down. And ultimately, one of those is Brett Yormark.
More NCAA women's basketball games coming to a hotel ballroom near you very soon, kind of thing, potentially. Yeah, that could be a really interesting aspect of it if the NCAA was actually spending more cash, because you got to level it out there to a degree. But would love to hear from you guys what you think, college basketball fans out there in the audience, what you think about an expanded tournament and maybe some of the pros and cons that you see on the horizon. All right, before we get out of here, Chris, let's switch gears and get into a football frame of mind and a little bit of a callback to a conversation we had last week as it relates to some preseason expectations for Texas Tech. First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and keep that ride or die ride on the road, or elevate your car's game to the next level of performance. Superchargers, exhaust kits, LED headlights, roof racks, and accessories of all kinds to fit your style. Whether it's power, speed, or design you're into, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to perfectly fit what you need. Just head over to ebay.com/motors now, where you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and at no risk because of eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit just right every time, or your money back, keeping you burning rubber and not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your ride or die on the road and moving your life forward at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions do apply. And a little bit of a callback to a conversation we had last week as it relates to some preseason expectations for Texas Tech. And as we talked about that on an episode last week, it was mostly related to, are we prepared to see where Texas Tech will be slotted in Big 12 preseason projections, which could very likely be in a 8 to 12 kind of neighborhood. And maybe that's underestimating it. I don't know, but that's sort of the number that we were throwing around on last week's episode. Seemed like a lot of fans, based on the YouTube comments, were prepared for that, understood that, and kind of echoed some of the reasoning that you and I got into as to even why that could be. But you also were digging into some, I want to say recent history, but it was more like, I don't know, a decade. Time sure flies whenever you suck at football for so long. I mean, when you get older, that's what I meant to say. But you were kind of digging into the threshold for, I guess, a category of, I don't want to necessarily even say elite, but just really relevant football programs, and a category that, unfortunately, given this sobering perspective for a Tech fan, I guess Tech does not belong to as we're heading into 2024. What's this all about?
Yeah, I think that we all have lived it and understood that you just haven't been very good over the last 10 to 15 years in football, and it's been very frustrating, and you've hired and fired coaches, and you are spending a ton of resources and throwing a lot of money at this issue. And Kirby will tell you all the time, we've got to get football fixed. Football has got to get fixed. We've got to be able to stand on our own as it relates to football. It's going to fuel everything else. And you're good in football. It's amazing how much better everything else is on your campus, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And the sobering reality is you look at the CFP, I think at first came into play, and there was no more BCS around, what are we talking, 13, 14, I think was kind of when the traditional BCS went away, which was that mathematical formula and all that. And so once we got the 14 playoff, it was I guess it was initially it was just a 2-team, then went to 4-team and all that, where you had the semifinals and all that business. But you had what was left over was the New Year's Six. We have all these bowl games. We want a spot of importance as well. We still want our New Year's Day games and all those things. And that's just a territory. We talk often. Texas Tech's never played in a Big 12 title game. Okay, never even, of course you haven't won it because you haven't played in it, played for it. And it's a sobering reality because there's a long list of teams that have. But I think that if you look even further, I just don't know if people realize, I'm going to take your currently constructed 16-team league that will participate in the league this fall. 6 of the 16 have played in and won a New Year's Six bowl game since 2014. 4 others have made it and played in one. So 10 of your 16 have actually made it. Which if you were playing in the equivalent of a New Year's Six bowl game, it would be, by all accounts, a wild success for your season. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Yeah, and because there's just not a lot of past precedents there. 08, 76, 73. We can all talk about them. Yeah, you've had some Cotton Bowl years where you won 9 games, and
oh god,
and some of those years where
I'm sobered up enough, Chris. These glasses of cold water don't get us reliving the Cotton Bowl. Some of those memories.
Texas Tech, Arizona State, Kansas, BYU, Colorado, and West Virginia. Those are the 6 teams that have not played in and obviously have not won a New Year's Six game since which you're going back a decade.
Also, can I add an asterisk to those who were formerly playing in like the American Athletic Conference and found their way to some of this stuff? Because I would assume, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess Cincinnati and UCF are on this list, right? Didn't they?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes, they are. Yeah. And then they qualify. I mean, UCF won one of these games 6 years ago. They made it and won it, which is why. And as did I'm looking at as did Houston. And it's funny you say that. It's funny you say that because this is exactly why you wanted to add them. This very stat and this kind of data is exactly why they were attractive to you. I think that's worth pointing out.
God, I'm glad we did this on a Monday. This would be a terrible Friday episode to sober up like this heading into the weekend, but a good Monday conversation to have. I don't think until you are able to reassert yourself on any kind of relevant radar, the preseason benefit of the doubt. And like we said, we're fine with not having it. You got to get out there and take everything. Nothing's going to be given to you, but just getting back on the radar is the first step. And that's not even really talking about, like New Year's Six bowl games. It's just getting back to consistently being an interesting program, which is what you were in the Mike Leach era. You really didn't, even though we didn't have an apples to apples equivalent at that time. It's not like every year then you were in these, like this echelon of bowl games either, but you were at least in the postseason, and you had some interesting finishes in the regular season when it comes to the Big 12 Conference, 2008 excluded, where obviously you did wind up in that kind of echelon of bowl game. But it's been a long time since you've even been on that kind of radar, just to where you're, relevant and needing to be accounted for. So as you've gotten a little bowl streak back in action, and you've won some bowl games as well, not just going, but winning, Joey McGuire's taking some steps in that direction. So maybe we'll see those steps continue to be taken and break on through. But it does seem now, Chris, with the expanded playoff and the playoff eating up these bowl games that we're referring to here, and connected to that, seemingly a difficult path for the Big 12 Conference to get in, a multitude of teams into this playoff, at least say compared to the Big 10 or the SEC. That path may be even more narrow for Texas Tech. Like, you may have to only be a league winner to get into those now. It can't be a second place or a third place. I don't know. I may be wrong on that. I kind of hope I'm wrong on that a second place Big 12 team would be good enough to qualify as a top 12 or a top 14, but I may bet your money on it, but I don't know if I'd bet mine on it just yet. I think you may have to be a conference winner to do it.
That's exactly why, while painful, it would behoove everybody to say, not that it matters, but it won't be a bad thing when your league does really well and they're out of league games for that very reason right there. And Texas Tech could find themselves in these conversations where, like, man, if so-and-so would have just beat so-and-so, maybe we'd have had a little more push, there. But we just – you see what I'm saying? But I think as you try to push through, it would directly benefit Texas Tech the better the entire league does out of conference in their games. But it just – I'll wrap up my thoughts here and just say that it just speaks to – we're ready to graduate. Everybody is, Joey included, Kirby included. Everybody that has anything to do with that football program over there is ready to push through, starting to be consistent and look back here, in 5 to 6 years and go, look at all the bowl games we won. Look at all the times we won 8, 9, 10, 11 games. And we were consistent. And it's hard to do. It's very difficult to do. And it's getting good is the easy part. Staying good is the hardest.
Both damn difficult in and of themselves.
Yep.
We can say that for sure. All right, some interesting things to consider there. Would love to hear from you and get some feedback in the YouTube comments. That's the best way to help us grow the show, is to comment anything below. So thanks to those who do that, and we invite you in if you have not been before. The water is warm and a little nutty every once in a while. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man. Enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.
Enjoy your Monday, people. We'll talk to you next time.
Appreciate you guys being out there. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode if you're not already. And we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.